Okay, we're good.
We're good? So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second forum. Today, we're going to provide some updates on some of the things that have been done in order to continue to prepare for our September 1st school opening. I am going to share my screen at this point so that we can display our presentation for the evening. I'll start off by saying that part of the work that we did this past few weeks was to really get a sense of where the community was in terms of deciding how many kids were going to come to in-person instruction versus distance learning. So I'm going to go over first the results of the survey, and then we're going to transition into some of the details around reopening that I think everybody wants to learn about. So for middle and high school, for middle school specifically, 57% of the students' families elected to have the students engage in a hybrid model, while 25% of the students opted into continuing distance learning. For high school, 55% of the population will like to continue in a hybrid model, while 27% would like to continue in distance learning. We still have approximately 18% or so of the population between the middle and high school that's still undecided and has not submitted their forms. We're still working with those families to ensure that they complete the forms so that we have an accurate measure of how many students will be returning to school. In preparation for reopening, we're asking that all of our principals August 17, engage in a town hall conversation with all of their families, providing specific details around reopening for their individual schools. So for middle school, the reopening session is going to take place between 6 and 7, August 17, and for high school between 6 and 8. For parents with students that have IEPs, we're holding a special forum for them to ask specific questions around services between 4 and 5 p.m. that day. And for parents that have multilingual learners, we're setting up a forum August 18 between 4 and 5. I'm going to turn it over to Frank, Dr. Constanza, who will provide details around some of the health, transportation, school foods, and other PPE equipment necessary to ensure our children's safety. Frank?
Thank you, Dr. Estrella, and good evening to parents out there, middle school and high school. You can see here that we've done quite a bit of work at creating a safe learning environment when your child returns into the classroom. It's been framed around 3 core areas. One is ensuring a safe and healthy learning environment, also mitigating any potential COVID-19 spreading, and then lastly, having a very rapid response in the event that we were to have somebody who was symptomatic at the school. And we do this through a variety of ways, and that includes reducing classroom density. That is a real key factor in our process. And at this point, at the middle and high school level, classrooms will be reduced by 50% or more by virtue of the hybrid model. And we'll get into the details of the hybrid model a bit later. We're investing quite a lot in infrastructure inside of classrooms and inside of school buildings that will help to enhance safety. These measures include plexiglass partitions at tables, guards and shields at some desks, signage that will be on floors and visible to students and staff as reminders. Hand sanitizing dispensers will be available in every classroom in the system. We've ordered 60 hand washing stations that we're going to locate in areas that we think are the most necessary and they'll tend to be with the lower elementary students who are removed from sinks and the ability to wash hands on a frequent basis. And each school will have an isolation room staffed with a school nurse and at times a paraprofessional that will be outfitted with all of the equipment necessary to deal with a potential symptomatic student or uh, more than one symptomatic student. Transportation will be available for all students who are eligible. That will be attending in person. We'll get into the details about that a bit later in the presentation. Breakfast and lunch will continue to be served for both in-person and remote students. For the remote students, that will occur at the tents that have been set up around the city over the past several months. There'll be some changes to locations, but we will update you on that. And we'll get into the lunch piece a bit later in more detail. And then lastly, the importance of mask wearing can't be understated, but we will have a large supply of disposable masks available in the nurses' headquarters if somebody were to need one.
Thank you, Dr. Costanza. The other piece that we wanted to highlight is around health and safety, around air quality, and some of the things that we have done based on the input from the community. So, Dr. Costanza, can you speak to those points?
Sure. So the audience should know that the district for the past several years has operated using MERV 8 filters throughout the air systems throughout the schools in the district. And at the time we were ready to replace those, the facilities department upgraded those filters to MERV 10s. And since then, there's been updated guidance that MERV 13s are if they're an available product in our area, could be utilized and would just further enhance the air filtration system. So we've gone ahead and ordered those. They'll be in mid-September, and will just be replaced. They'll be replacing the MERV 10s as soon as they come in. Superintendent was very interested in providing additional air filtration system throughout the school district. So in addition to our school buildings and the air systems, the air handling systems in those buildings, we now will have an individual HEPA air filter unit in each classroom in the system. We have about 1,000 classrooms. And these HEPA filters are high efficiency particulate air systems that remove impurities from the air, will do a great deal of cleaning of the air. And those students with allergies and staff should see an improvement in their allergies with these systems in place. And then last quick point here, we do have some schools that are utilizing the gyms or the cafeterias. These are non-traditional academic locations. But where we are doing that, we are doing everything we can to add improved airflow, air conditioning where possible. And so wanted you to be aware of that as well.
Thank you. And air conditioners will only be placed in those facilities that have windows accessible to the outside. So that also created some limitations in how we were utilizing some of the spaces. Thank you, Dr. Costanza. So now we're going to talk a little bit about specific health and safety protocols for middle schools. Sandra Fejios, can you speak about these?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Estrella. So we have made sure to plan with each individual school some arrival procedures and other sort of procedures that make the best sense for that campus. So each campus, they're all going to have staggered times for entering, staggered though within a few minutes, just so that it's not disruptive to the family's schedule. But different entrances will be assigned either depending on house or depending on grade. These will be communicated to you during the town hall for your specific school. Health screeners will be collected at those entrances, and students will have hand sanitizing stations at all entrances to the schools to be sure to sanitize prior to entering the building. And then again, they have hand sanitizing stations at the classrooms. Now, students will be cohorted within their house by grade. There's only 1 or 2 transitions into a different group if you're like an accelerated math or in those types of situations. But we are going to cohort by house and grade. Now, the classroom density has been significantly reduced. It's generally between 12 and 14 students in each class. And we've ensured that there are 6 feet apart in their seating. Transitions have also been planned and staggered by house so that you don't have all the students transitioning in the hallways at the same time. And classroom furniture will be disinfected regularly. And dismissal time is also staggered and will be communicated to you by your school principal.
Thank you. Now she's going to speak in reference to high school health and safety protocols.
Yeah, so similarly, similar procedures for the high schools. Depending on which high school you attend, there's a staggered arrival. Those times will be communicated to you by your school principal. There's going to be changes to the entrances and where parents can drop off. There's also going to be a student health screener. And the good thing about the health screener at the high school is that it's an actual app that we are working on right now with IT to make sure that we have it in place that students can enter quickly and have somebody check that screener prior to entry. It's going to be these entry at multiple points again and staffed by our staff. And bus and drop-offs and walkers arrive at these distinct locations, and you can expect that communication. Student transitions have also been staggered. So there's only small batches of students transitioning at any time so that we don't have bottlenecking at any one entrance or any one hallway. And classroom furniture will also be disinfected regularly. Dismissal again is staggered, and the parent and bus pickup departures will be separate and will be communicated depending on your community.
Thank you. So I want to go into now the programming for the middle and high school. For the middle program, we have structured a day where the kids are going to be in an AAABB, a model that will cycle through, giving students an opportunity to have in-person instruction in a consecutive cycle of 5 days once the cycle takes effect. As you can see here, by the time we complete week 1, excuse me, group B will have 5 consecutive days of in-person instruction, and subsequently group A would as well. In this case, also for middle school students, because we have a hybrid model, students with IEPs and Ls, depending on their particular needs, will have also the option to be in person 5 days a week. And obviously those families that select the virtual option will have that option as well. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Myers to speak about the day in the life of a middle school student. In person and distance, we're going to provide you a sample of the program, but we're not going to go into a lot of detail just for the sake of time. But we will upload this presentation so that you have all the specifics around programming. Dr. Myers?
Thank you. So as we take a look at a middle school student who would be coming in an in-person setting, this might be their A day, group 1, and they arrive at school. And what we'll find is that there's a pretty good pattern of the middle school day that would look very similar to last year, where we would have basically a block schedule. Students would come in, they would have their assignment with their teacher for block 1. They would have some break time, they'd have their lunch time, they'd have maybe their elective built in there, they'd have their math block, their ELA block, their science block would be built into their day. And basically our middle school block are 60 minutes. We go to look at the distance learning. So now,
sorry, something is going wrong.
So this is the in-person where the student then finishes the day and may stay for an after-school program or maybe boarding the bus to go home. probably looks very similar to what we're used to. If we look at the second example, which would be if the student in the middle school was having a day that was distance learning, so now they're in the hybrid model, this day will look very similar. Children who are in face-to-face and who are in distance learning start their day at the same time. Everyone in the class would be logging into their computer, getting set for their learning for the day. They would know what their first period class is, and their first period class is the same. It starts the same time, whether they're in person or they're virtual. Their second period starts at the same time. Their lunch block is the same. The difference is when they're home, they'd be getting their own lunch and taking their own break. While they're in school, that would be a structured time. So the student is in the cohort. If we go to the next slide on virtual, you'll see the same pattern is followed. So this creates consistency for middle school students. One of the things we built into our model is to make sure that our students have the same teacher for their courses throughout the year. They'd be receiving their report card from the teacher. So their ELA teacher for 7th grade will be the same teacher, whether they're remote or if they are in face-to-face. Same for their math. So this creates the middle school schedule. If we go to the next slide, we can get a little bit more detailed example. So in that first block, we would see students all signing in face-to-face and virtual. We would have our warm-up, our mini lesson, our time to check in as we build our community. And then we'd go into our Google Classroom and we'd know what our assignment structures are. And we might move into some small group instruction. There may be a video that we need to watch with a response, some reading activities, some independent learning time, as well as some one-to-one conferencing time. And then typically at the end of the period, we would come back together. We report out, we see if there's any questions, we bring closure to the period, and maybe we have our ticket out the door for a little bit of a formative assessment. And then going into second block for the day, third block, fourth block, so that we have a full complement of core instruction.
Thank you. And now this is another example, but this PowerPoint will be available for you to view the different, the model in more detail, because I know we're going through the slides quickly. Frank, can you please speak a little bit about recess and the other components for middle school?
Yes, you can see here that the aerial view photo is picked from one of the operating manuals from one of our middle schools. The recess will happen for the most part outside, and you can see that these demarcated areas will be different areas in which students will go. Within that large circular area, there may be 3 or 4 cohorts of students who will stick together within a even smaller confined area. And the idea is to not mix students wherever possible. So the students would remain together. These areas would be marked off by the principal or by someone at the school that would be made clear to the students, and that's where they would stay. Lunch for all students would occur in their classrooms. As you know, the middle schools have 3 houses. Each house will have a dedicated mobile food cart, which will be brought down to that house from the kitchen. Students will go to the mobile food cart. It'll be a touchless system. They'll pick up a prepackaged sealed lunch. There'll be a couple of different options. They'll bring that back to the classroom, and that's where they'll have their lunch with the students in that classroom. And then the image down at the bottom, you can see here, our hallways will look differently than they have in the past. Most importantly, there'll be far fewer students going from one class to another in the hallway. But there'll be signage, and there will be a traffic flow that goes in one direction or another. And all of this in an effort to reduce the number of students in the hallways.
Thank you.
And here, you will hear more from your principals next on Monday, August 17th, during the middle school town hall meeting, it wouldn't be at that point where you would know your student schedule, but shortly thereafter, your child will be grouped either in group 1 or group 2, and each group has a specific in-person and remote learning schedule that cycles through every couple of weeks. And I think we've mentioned that second bullet, 12 to 14 students in most classrooms.
Thank you. Now we're going to transition into looking at the high school model. The high school model has been designed based on how they are programmed as well, because of the fact that they are in blocks, and in order for the high school students to complete one cycle of their coursework, they need 2 consecutive days to do that. As a result of that, we organize the program as AABB, cycling through over time. This is an example of what their block schedule would look like on any given week. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Myers to speak to the flow of the day for a high school student.
Thank you so much. So just as we were talking about with middle school, high school has a traditional pattern in it, and we're a block scheduled school district where students have 4 courses on day A and 4 courses on day B, so that they typically have an 8-course schedule, and those are extended blocks of about 75 minutes. So a student who is in person would get their typical 9th grade schedule. They would take the bus to school and arrive. They would then have their blocks laid out for them with their teachers. So maybe I have my English block first and then my math block second. Built into that day is time for advisory, also part of a high school SEL programming. We also have time for lunch built into the day. We have our block 3 and our block 4, and then the end of the day, and possibly the student will be participating in extracurricular activities after school. That is a typical flow that we would see for high school students. High school schedule, they would, if I'm a group 1 student, I would come 2 days. The first day I'd get my first 4 blocks. The second day I'd get my next 4 blocks. And then I would be remote for 2 days. And then I'd be back in for 2 days. So it runs on a 2-day cycle with the A-B schedule, with half of our children being in hybrid for remote and half face-to-face. If we go to the face-to-face, we're going to see a very similar pattern. Or if we go to distance learning. So this is if the same student would be going into the classroom. So now they're on their distance learning day. We'll go back one, thank you. And in that same schedule, they would at home in distance learning be signing into their computer, blocking into the first block, getting the directions from the teacher, working again in that whole group, small group structure with some students face-to-face, some students virtually. They would be using the same schedule at home that they would be using if they were face-to-face. And then at the end of the day, in the distance and learning environment, the student may be coming in so that they can have some after-school activities.
Thank you, Dr. Myers. Dr. Costanza, can you speak about high school student life?
Yes, you can see here that both of our high school campuses have just about 2,000 students. The Norwalk High side has 1,900, McMahon has 2,000. So given that we have just over half of families opting for the hybrid, you would take 50% of that number. So it's looking like we're going to have less than 1,000 students on each campus on any given day, probably closer to 750 to 800 students. It provides us with an opportunity to have ample space between students. Desks will be configured at least 6 feet apart. We still plan to do collaborative learning environments. So what you see in the image is a classroom with desks in rows, but it isn't necessary to always be in rows to achieve the distance that we're looking for. And then in terms of dining, this will be probably a refreshing change for high school students. There will be 4 or 5 cafe style satellites, if you will, dispersed around each of the two main campuses. And those large carts will have 4 different menu options for students to choose from. They'll make that selection, and then there'll be a few varieties for the way they could eat their meal. With permission from a teacher, they could go back to a classroom. At Norwalk High School, they're using the outdoor courtyard, which really should be a lovely place for kids to go and enjoy a bite to eat outside. And both schools are also looking at partitioning off a couple of large areas in the building and having some tables and desks that would have all of the COVID-19 safeguards present there in those locations as well. And it would be smaller groups of kids that would be having lunch at any one time.
Can you also speak about high school hallway transitions really quickly and bathroom
Yeah.
use?
Yes, I can. In fact, we were meeting with the principals twice per week, and we were on with the principals a little earlier today. And in each of the 4 high schools, they're expanding their transition times. Typically, a high schooler has 4 or 5 minutes to get from one class to another. We are expanding that window to anywhere from between 10 and 20 minutes. And the principle here is that we would take cohorts of students, small groups of students, have them pass through the hallways in 5 minutes, but do so without the large crowds, and then work with another group of students and do the same. And so it's a staggered idea, but there would be a quarter of the density in the hallways at any one time through that approach. Um, the other the other piece that's worth mentioning, I know it's coming up about cleaning service tops. Um, we're talking with the administrators today. We also met with facilities, and we're going to implement a process where there's routine surface top cleaning throughout the day, and that'll happen in a combination of ways. The district's well stocked with sanitizing wipes and cleaner and paper towels. So it'll be a team effort, but the plan is to keep these surface tops clean throughout various parts of the day.
Thank you. Ralph, can you please speak about some of the technology and connectivity updates?
Good, actually, I'd be happy to. So real quickly, I know that one of the things we noticed in our last iteration of COVID-19 and the earlier in the years is the inequities that we had with our students in the area of access and devices. Since then, we're really proud to say that come September, every student will have a device, K-12, and those are all being dispersed right now. But we're also working in partnership with the city and the Dalio Family Foundation to bring internet access to 1,000 of our families, our most needy families, which is where we've been able to see that there's about a 7% need in the district to be able to bring internet to those families at home. And the way this is going to work is that families that have the re-registration have explained whether or not they're coming in for distance learning or if they're going to be in person. And they've also indicated whether or not they need internet access. So what we've done is we've already got 145 families that we're going to be working with, that I'll be giving those names to Altice, and they'll be in contact with them to begin installations. These are families, we're prioritizing the ones that are actually going to be in distance learning, not coming in, and also do not have Wi-Fi access. So those will be the first families that we will work on installations, and we'll continually work on it until we get to our 1,000. So we're very, very excited about that. And like I said, I think it's definitely, it's such a move in the right direction for all of our families.
Yeah.
In regards to devices, currently all of our grades 3 through 8 students all have their devices, and they've been actually deployed as of last year. Grades 9 through 12, principals are reaching out to parents currently right now to be able to, you'll be receiving information on when you can come and pick up your student can come and pick up their laptop, and it'll be we'll do this in a socially distanced manner where you'll have a drive up that you'll be able to come up to at your certain time. A technician will bring that out. We'll scan it so that we can tag it to the student, and students will get their laptops in that manner. This will, like I said, we have a schedule that's coming out. Each principal is working on that and sending it out to the families this week, and the deployment will start next week. For the kindergarten through second grade laptops, those are all currently at the buildings, at the elementary schools, and ready to be deployed. We're currently just tagging them per student, and we'll be bringing them to the classrooms where students will be. On the first day of school, they will actually be the computers will be provisioned, ready to go for the students to be able to use them. Students that are going to be studying remotely will will actually get some communication from their principals a few days prior to the beginning of school to schedule a time to come in and pick up their laptop. And then finally, one of the other areas that we knew that we wanted to support and actually grow was our support system for families. So in September, we will have a regular ongoing support online office hours manned by a number of staff members and it will be bilingual. So students will be, so parents will be able to log on to either a Zoom call that's open, so they just click onto the link and go in, or they can actually, there'll be a phone number to call into that Zoom call on a regular basis. That'll be open from 8 to 12 and from 1 to 4 every day. And the support types that we're in that space are connectivity questions. So how do I connect to my Wi-Fi with my computer? I'm having basic computer hardware troubleshooting issues. How do I plug in a microphone? As well as software questions. So I need to get a password reset. I can't access Google Classroom. How do I work with this? So those are the types of questions we'll have answers for, as well as additional support for them as the year goes on. And then finally, last year, we did have a depot center at the Old Norwalk Pathways Academy for parents that were students that were remote throughout the second half of the year. If they did have a broken device, they were able to schedule a time to come down to the Old Norwalk Pathways Academy and replace that device. We will be continuing that this coming year. Thank you. Oh, and yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm good.
So I'm going to now turn it to Dr. Gurovich to speak a little bit about the special education component.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. So the IEP services will be fully implemented in terms of hours and goals. Students with moderate to severe disabilities will be grouped to be able to come into school 5 days a week. Students with mild disabilities will be cluster grouped into their general education cohorts, and we will have our staff pushing in to deliver those IEP hours. Staff will be limited to 2 to 3 classrooms maximum, and we have been working with the building principals to ensure that we have sufficient staff that can be assigned to support this model, and also to ensure that the classes that are cohort grouped with students with IEPs are balanced with regard to gender and race and ethnicity and functional grouping. This is based upon best practices of research of decades of work in collaborative teaching in special ed, in co-teaching in special ed, and in our SEM gifted program. Related services will be provided in person to our most impacted students with synchronous hybrid related services being provided for our other students. We have acquired very high quality headphones with microphones to ensure that a student involved in related services of counseling has full confidentiality and privacy in that modality. PPTs and evaluations will continue as they have all summer. We've been quite successful in that, and we are reaching out to our 200 or so medically fragile students so that we can make individual plans with them to assist them in feeling comfortable with our safety plans for their return or addressing the specific needs should they opt into remote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Gurovich will be having a special session to go into more detail about special education programming. One of the questions, Yvette, that came on was around 504s.
Yes.
And if students with 504s will be given the option to in-person everyday instruction.
So I did respond to that
Okay, so you addressed
that question already online.
Tom Hamilton, can you provide a quick update of where we are with state funding?
Sure, just very quickly, obviously, the environment we're in now does impose a number of additional costs that the district has identified those costs and is identifying available funding to support them. One of the issues we're still waiting on, last week, Governor Lamont did announce that the state of Connecticut would be making $166 million available to school districts throughout the state. We understand now that we expect the state will be providing district by district numbers of available funds perhaps as early as tomorrow. And so that will give us a clearer understanding, a clearer picture of the total funding that's available through this new grant program. We are also working through funding that remains from the earlier ESSER CARES Act grant. There is still some additional funding there, and we're trying to identify other areas within the district budget to secure funds to cover all of the additional expenses here.
Thank you. Frank, there's some questions around what regularly means in terms of classroom cleaning. Can you please elaborate on that piece?
Sure. The facilities department and our administrative teams at the 4 schools have been discussing the best ways to clean the desks and the other high touch surface areas. We have the stock and the supply, and it'll be a team effort, a combination of the custodians who will be able to do that to some extent during the school day, but also others in the building that may be called upon to assist in just wiping down surface tops. The virus is said to be one that perishes as soon as there's any type of not even sanitizing, but just a cleaning. And we intend to do that as often as possible throughout the day. I know Bill Hodel has ordered a stockpile of disinfectant wipes and cleaning solution and paper towel. So it's just a matter of getting folks lined up to be able to do this periodically throughout the day.
And another question was around bathroom cleaning, usage routines and cleaning.
Okay, and per health guidance, it's recommended that bathrooms get cleaned at least twice each day. We intend to do that at least twice per day, and the facilities department will be working through their lead custodians at each building. There'll be work logs that will be in place at each school, and that will include the time, the individual, and the cleaning that occurs so that we can monitor this on a regular basis to ensure that bathrooms are being cleaned at least twice per day, not including the evening cleanings.
Thank you. So another question was, is high school opening in a hybrid model? The answer to that is yes. That's how we articulate, went over the model. It's hybrid, where if A is in person, B is remote, and vice versa. The other question is, what about band and chorus in middle school? Will these still happen? Brenda, you want to speak to those?
So one of the pieces of guidance that we continue to monitor is for large group performances, orchestra, band, and chorus, and making sure that we have a clear delineation about the risk level and what we need to do for distance and for helping to keep students safe. And so some of that guidance, what we're working on right now is some of the work is where lessons are done, where a student is working with their teacher remotely. If we do have a small ensembles, how we spread them out and are able to actually maintain the distance that's required while having small groups do some of the practicing. We've also looked at some of the pieces that we'll be adding that actually can be added to the instrument or added to the floor to help protect students. So each one of those conditions, right now, there'll be no large group performances, as you can imagine. We'll continue to use what we call the virtual performance. I think we enjoyed a lot of those during the month of May and June, where our students were able to do their performances, but we actually weave those together with software in a virtual environment. You're going to see that continue as we move into this school year.
Thank you. The next question, Frank, I think Frank or Sandra can answer. When will bus schedules be out for students that require it? And will there be hot lunches provided or just cold lunches or just sandwiches? Will there be menus in advance and will there be supply lists provided?
Well, to that second question first, there will be a couple of hot options, and I believe one of those options is pizza. The menus will be made available to students in advance, but make no mistake, the menu choices will be reduced, considerably per the requirements of the FDA and the CDC. On the first question, the transportation office is working overtime on a variety of different areas. We have the pandemic. We also have the later school start time, which is set to launch this year. We have a new transportation vendor and a brand new fleet of full propane operated buses. So these changes have required a lot of work in new areas like hiring new drivers and managers, outfitting the bus depot, and figuring out how we refuel the propane buses. But all students will get their bus stops, their bus numbers, and well before the first day of school.
These also will be mailed home. That's what Joanna had shared with us, that they're actually going to be mailed home also.
Thank you. And there's questions around positive tests. Frank, can you speak about the protocols in place if we have someone who has been identified as positive for COVID?
Sure. We have been working with our health director and our health coordinator throughout this process, and Sandra can also elaborate on this. When we have a confirmed positive case, that person is quarantined for a period of 10 days, and anybody that has come within 6 feet of that person for 15 or more minutes is considered to be exposed according to the CDC. In those instances, those individuals are actually quarantined for longer. They're quarantined for 14 days. And the district school nurses have been trained on proper contact tracing and work very closely with the city's health department on contact and exposure tracing so that questioning and interviewing can happen almost immediately when we suspect the potential for a positive case. So we do the pre-work, if you will. If it's determined that a presumptive positive case winds up being positive, then all of those folks who have been contacted through the contact process would immediately go into quarantine.
Dr. Estrella, it might be useful also to mention Addendum 5 and maybe making that available with this presentation.
Mm-hmm.
which runs through different scenarios for if you test positive or if you have symptoms, and it actually breaks it down by different scenarios. We can make that available for
So I
families.
think we will post the
Yeah.
PowerPoint tomorrow so we can add that piece. Because I think it will be helpful for people that were not able to attend to have that information. And I think something, one around the cleaning protocol, especially for the middle and for the high school, because the middle school students are not going to be fluctuating as much in terms of their spaces. They're not rotating. But for the high school students, I know that that question came up a lot tonight. So I just wanted to say thank you for the board members that are with us today. We have Godfrey Azima here, Diana Carpio, and Heidi Keys for joining us for this conversation. Some of them have been here since the first session, so we really appreciate that. I don't know if you want to have some final words to say.
Alex, I have a question just regarding the town hall that are coming up next week. The time that they will be taking place for grade levels, will they be different at the same time, just to allow parents who have children in multiple schools to be able to attend?
So the way that it's set up, I'll go to that slide really quickly. It's at different times for that reason. So the times are fluctuating. They're an hour, 1 hour after the other, so that parents that have kids in multiple grades have the opportunity to attend. All of them, some of them, or those that apply for the grade bands their children attend.
Will the town hall facilitated by Yvette be offered at different times for each grade level, or is it at one?
Just one session for the district.
Have we thought about having 3 different sessions, just looking at the attention needed and questions I anticipate will come from parents of different ages?
I think what we can do, because I know Yvette has other forums, we will assess how this forum plays out and the participation. If we see that there's a need for additional ones, we can always schedule additional ones.
As well, Godfrey, we have reinstituted our weekly Facebook Live event with our NSPED PAC exec board. We had one last night that's very specific topics requested by parents, so that will supplement the town hall, not replace it in any way.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There's a final question about password resetting for high school students. Ralph, I don't know if you could quickly answer that question.
Yes. So I think if the question is whether or not students need to, in the past, we've had to have password resets at the beginning of the year. That will not be the case anymore. So with our new systems that are in place, students will still use the same password. If they do have password reset issues, they'll be able to log into that online help support as well. We'll be able to walk them through the steps of doing that. Students also through ClassLink can now actually set codes and put their cell phone in there if they have one, that they can then get a code to be able to reset their own password. And we will have directions up for that as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So any other board member would like to say a final word?
I think we're good. The only thing I think that was mentioned, I had mentioned during the first forum, if we can maybe go back to the original slide, we were talking about the filters, and I know Frank, Dr. Costanzo did a really great job as far as going over that and reviewing that. But Frank, if you can just elaborate a little bit more. I know we talked about if we needed to change those out and how frequently we would be changing out the filters if need be.
Yeah, it sounds like there are a couple of different filters within these systems. There are permanent filters, and then
Right.
there are filters that get disposed. I've done a little bit of research on this. Some of these filters need to be cleaned with cold water only, and there's another set that get vacuumed, believe it or not. And I think Bill Hodel is on the call. He has said that these filters would be replaced on a quarterly basis. But Bill, if you have any additional details about the cleaning process and the replacement process of the HEPA filters, that would be helpful.
So yes, we're going to double up instead of twice a year. The plan is to do it 4 times a year. Between that and installing HEPA filters in every classroom, you got close to clean room conditions like in a hospital. That air will be filtered from above, the central fan, and within the classroom with that particular unit. And by both of those units working with high efficiency filters, you can't ask for a better environment.
Thank you. There was another piece, I think Heidi coupled to that about getting the HEPA filters with a UV light. We're looking into that, but we don't know if we can get the commercial grade, which we will need for the rooms that we're talking about with the UV light. But it's something we're looking into. I know somebody asked that question earlier. So I just want to conclude by saying thank you to all of our parents for being so patient through this complicated process. I know these times are not easy, but we're working day and night to ensure that we are creating the best learning environment for all of our children. And most importantly, that we're keeping all of our children safe. So I want to thank you for trusting us through this process. And as we continue to acquire more information, we will keep you updated as much as we possibly can. Wishing everybody a great weekend if I don't speak to anybody on Friday. And have a blessed rest of your day. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.